And Dawson Garcia was a story. I mean, obviously he hit the big shot, but their inability, Michigan's inability to contain Dawson Garcia off the dribble really eventually did them in. I know he hit the 40-footer to win it, but his ability to get downhill off the bounce, you look at the 15 offensive rebounds for Minnesota, not only does that show effort, but just the persistence to get downhill and to put Michigan in rotation. And when I say rotation, you get a tough matchup like Dawson Garcia up top. He's going against Danny Wolf. Now you got a guy, you got a guy like Frank Mitchell who gets 6 offensive rebounds. Why is he getting those offensive rebounds? Because when Wolf gets beat off the bounce, Vlad Golden's got to go over to try to block and contest and rotate. Who's that leave under the basket for offensive rebounds? Frank Mitchell. So that was to me the story of the game. But it all starts with Dawson Garcia, and I'm thrilled for him because he's a guy that could have probably chased a bag elsewhere. Hasn't won the last few years at Minnesota. Could have gone somewhere else. Sticks with it and gets a massive, massive moment that he's going to remember forever there in the barn.
Jarrell, I mean, this Minnesota team, really unfortunate loss to Ohio State in overtime a couple of weeks back. Lose a tight one to Maryland, and you finally get the result. I mean, I know you weren't in many situations like this where you were under 500 in January and you needed a prayer, but they got one. And I would just ask, like, how powerful do you think that could be for them?
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I was fortunate enough to not be in that situation a lot, John. But at least in college, I still had. We all run into those dog days as pros if you're fortunate enough to go on and play after college. But man, it's been tough sledding for Minnesota. It's a huge win, obviously. More than anything, just to bring some excitement and some joy back to that locker room. It's really tough to lose games the way that they've been losing games. Like if anybody got a chance to watch the way that they lost that game against Ohio State a few weeks back, you couldn't help but feel a little good for Minnesota tonight, man. And it's also a credit to Coach Johnson, man. That's clearly a team that's been scrapping and fighting the entire way. Sort of like Mike said, it's real easy when things aren't going well at this time of the year. You start off, you can't buy a win in conference play either. So you kind of digging yourself even bigger hole, and things usually go one or two ways. Where the locker room completely quits on you and everybody's thinking about just the off season and getting the hell out of there and getting this thing over with. Or you could lock down and scrap, man, and fight for the guy that's next to you. And I think you saw a lot of that tonight. They had me a little bit worried, man, because I thought it was going left when I seen the one kid throw the ball off the back of the structure of the rim. So I was like, man, this is gonna be tough if they lose another game like this. So man, I'm not gonna lie, I was happy to see him win. Obviously for Dawson Garcia, a guy who's kind of been there through it all and seen a ton of being on the wrong side of this thing. For him to be the guy to hit that shot tonight, a logo three, a step inside half court. Just a great atmosphere. The fans were excited. They got a little mini court storm there as well too, and I think it also just speaks, obviously to the depth of the conference of the Big Ten too, man. It's just it's hard winning on the road, man. But it's a lot of good teams in that conference, even the ones that aren't doing well.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of the theme of the night, right, that we're about to get into here. I mean, Michigan, last week and a half ago, goes to UCLA, and we've learned some things about UCLA in time since then. But in that moment, I mean, that was a hell of a win. You pack them up by 20 at their place, and then, of course, you come back and you drop this one. Mike, I always am very careful, even if it's good teams, right? Like, I'm always very careful not to overweigh road losses, right? Like, I mean, it's just incredibly difficult, to do that consistently. So when you're thinking about this performance from Michigan, especially against an underperforming Minnesota team, where do you come down on tonight for the Wolverines?
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota's not an easy place to play. I mean, anybody that's been in that arena, the court's elevated. They have by far the smallest locker room in the Big Ten. I mean, it just runs probably 7 feet wide, maybe, and then just goes straight back. And there's just lockers to the side. You're packed like sardines in there. You have to walk up this little staircase to get to the floor. And so it's an unorthodox place to play to begin with. But for Michigan, they've been playing with fire all season, and they've had these double-digit leads. They had double-digit lead against Arkansas, squandered the Oklahoma game after having a double-digit lead. USC, they had a double-digit lead and let them back into it. They eventually pushed it back open. Same thing with UCLA. You get up big early. UCLA, I think, takes a 4-point lead, 3-point lead in the second half, and then you flip it the other way and run them out of the gym again. Michigan has these elite stretches. They build these leads because they have elite stretches on both ends where they're really guarding, where Danny Wolf finds this zone. They start really getting into a rhythm with that big on big ball screen. Trey Donaldson gets going. Namari Burnett's been one of the most efficient players in America this year. I mean, they can get you from a lot of different angles. Early tonight, it was Will Cheddar, who comes back to his home state, a guy that was like a 25-point per game guy in high school who's accepted his role. They got a lot of really good players, and I'm not out on them at all because they lost a road game. These games happen not only in the Big Ten, they happen across America. We've seen it just this week as well. So the thing with them is they're still going to have several advantages every time they step on the floor, mainly because of that front court. I talked about the elite stretches that they have. It's just going to come down to how they value the basketball. And tonight they got burned. I mean, they had 13 turnovers tonight. Some of them felt like they were in somewhat big moments down the stretch there. Got to get that rectified, and then you just can't concede possessions like that. And then when you have a guy like a Dawson Garcia, who's a really, really tough matchup, a 4 or a 5 that can take you off the bounce, how do you fare if you're Danny Wolf? How do you fare if you're Vlad Golden? Because tonight it was an issue. And does that persist moving forward? Those are things that got to get rectified. But it's one loss here in January, and I still think with their loss, with Illinois' loss to USC, that conference is still up for grabs, and Michigan's still in that race.
So, Jarrell, knowing, the highs that Michigan has shown and certainly some lows here, where do they fit in for you in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I'm right on par with Mike with this one. This isn't a concerning loss. Obviously, it's a game that they would have loved to have and kind of continue to set them out in front of the pack or leading the pack in the Big Ten. But like you said, the theme of the show is it's hard to win on the road. But you got to give those guys credit. They built up a lead. Theoretically, they controlled the majority of the game. Michigan was in full control. Eventually, Minnesota made a run at it and kind of got the crowd back involved in the game in the second half. And they kind of it was a nip and tuck game from that point forward. But there were a couple times where Minnesota kind of had them on the ropes toward the end, and Michigan just came up with an answer every single time. I think they have one of the most unique dynamics on offense, just with that front court, like you guys talked about, but just the things that Wolf is able to do. And really, he's sort of like the trigger man. He's the point man for them. Working out of that 4 or 5 ball screen to even throwing the small guards in there and doing the double drag action where he's able to, kind of get to those elbows or mid-post spots on the floor and make passes to get other guys easy looks, specifically Golden. They have a great connection with that, kind of like that high-low pass straight on once he gets it around the top of the key, hitting him there. And he also has the ability to handle the ball and go to work from there. But like Mike said, tonight was a really tough matchup. And let's not be mistaken. Dawson Garcia is one of the best players in the league. He's a matchup problem. Specifically for those two guys, I worry a bit about them defensively because I think those guys do struggle to keep the ball in front, and they will struggle just as far as a foot speed aspect. If they run into guys like that, kind of those hybrid players that can put the ball on the deck a little bit and do some things off of the dribble from the perimeter or guarding ball screens, whatever it may be. And those guys are way too important on the offensive end. Is my main concern for those guys to be, kind of like defensive liability. So, but for the most part, Michigan's going to be around. They'll be right and running for things right now, as far as I can tell. And I think they're one of the best teams in the Big Ten for sure.